In this Diablo 4 video, I'm going to be showing you our Juggernaut build. This is a Hammer of the Ancients Barbarian build that's aimed at level 50+, and is a good alternate to Whirlwind if you've been looking for a devastatingly powerful build at this part of the game. The key feature of this build is the Walking Arsenal Key passive, which motivates you to constantly swap weapons while attacking enemies. The main limitation for this passive is the amount of fury that you can spend in combination with the cooldown of some skills. To overcome this, we'll use a combination of aspects, skills, and passives that will allow us to maintain 100% uptime while keeping the fury gauge at max at all times. This build allows you to engage enemies in many different ways, but the general idea is to start off with lunging strike, dual-wielded, and then use ground stomp to stun enemies. You'll follow up with death blow, slashing, and finally strike with Hammer of the Ancients, bludgeoning. If any enemy remains alive, you'll use death blow again to finish them off and continue into the next group. From here, you want to swap to lunging strike, Hammer of the Ancients, death blow as your regular combo, but you can adapt to different scenarios as required. If you're getting overrun or facing multiple elites, you can unleash the Iron Maelstrom ultimate, which decimates everything on the screen while cycling through all your weapons. This build acts similar to a glass cannon, as you'll sacrifice some defensive skills to maximize damage output, but this isn't an issue as you'll constantly applying stun, and you kill stuff so fast they won't even have a chance to strike back. Skills play a huge role in this build, as you will constantly cycle between them in order to maintain the Walking Arsenal passive active. Each skill has a different role, and it's important to understand what each of them do in order to use them effectively. Let's start by explaining in more detail how the Walking Arsenal Key passive works. After you unlock it, you'll notice 3 individual globes above your skill bar. These represent the passives for each weapon type. When you hit an enemy with either a two-handed bludgeoning, two-handed slashing, or dual-wield weapon, its corresponding globe will fill yellow and start draining, letting you know that the passive is active and how much time you have left. While active, each of the passives will grant you 10% increased damage for 6 seconds. The damage for these passives are cumulative, and while all 3 passive bonuses are active, you'll gain an additional bonus of 15% increased damage. To activate the passive, you'll need to use a skill that is using the arsenal weapon type. It's very important to assign the correct weapon to each of your main skills, as this will allow you to keep the rotation. You want to use dual wielding for lunging strike, slashing for death blow, and bludgeoning for Hammer of the Ancients. Remember that you can change this by opening the skill menu, hovering over the skill, and then cycling the correct selection type. Let's take a look at the skills. First is lunging strike. This basic skill allows you to close the gap with enemies and get straight inside a group, as well as activating the dual wielding bonus and generating some fury. It's not necessary to get an upgrade for, as you'll only use it to reposition yourself in the battlefield. Next is Hammer of the Ancients. This is the main skill of our build, allowing us to trigger the bludgeoning passive, deal massive AoE damage, stun enemies, and increase our fury generation. Let's talk about its upgrade first, which provides you with an increased percentage in fury generation for each enemy it gets damaged by, up to a maximum of 30%. Thanks to the aspect of Ancestral Force, which increases the AoE, you'll be often getting the max stack as soon as the fight begins. This synergizes great with the fury generated by Death Blow and Furious Impulse passive. For the upgrade, you want to take the Furious Hammer of the Ancients, making it so you deal 1% additional damage for each point of fury you have when using it. Increasing your maximum fury will further boost the effect, so if you have, for example, 120 fury, you'll deal 120% more damage, which is insane. Next is Death Blow. Death Blow serves both as a finisher as well as a resource generator in this build. When used, you deal a massive amount of damage as well as triggering the slashing passive. The Weapon Master's aspect will provide you an additional charge, making it more forgiving, and allowing you to use it at the start of fights to generate fury. The Exposed Vulnerability passive will guarantee that your next Hammer of the Ancients will apply vulnerable to all enemies that get hit, greatly increasing your damage. You want to finish a fight with the Death Blow, making it so the next fight you can lead with Hammer of the Ancients to apply the vulnerable status, and then Death Blow to finish them off and repeat the sequence. Death Blow will get 1 charge refunded if you kill an enemy while using it, so I recommend using a weapon that provides damage to injured enemies in your slashing slot, as this will ensure that you're killing them to get back the spent charge and maintain 100% uptime. Another thing that makes Death Blow so good is the aspect of Encroaching Wrath, which often allows you to one-shot elites. This aspect activates after you spend 100 fury, or about 3 Hammers of the Ancients, providing you a one-time buff that increases damage by a massive 200% damage increase when slotted onto a two-handed weapon. Then we come to Iron Maelstrom. This ultimate ability uses all of our arsenal weapons in 3 different stages, triggering each Walking Arsenal passive, allowing you to annihilate everything on the screen. First, you'll hit the ground stunning enemies with your bludgeoning weapon and dealing damage. This will enable all stun damage effects as well as preventing enemies from attacking you. Next, it will use slashing weapons to deal both regular damage and apply massive bleeding. To finish off, it'll swing your dual wields weapon, hitting enemies multiple times for even more damage. This is an amazing skill to clear out big mobs or to deal with multiple elites at the same time. Its only big downside is that once you activate it, you won't be able to use any other skills until you finish the combo. This means you won't be able to trigger Iron Skin if you get crowd control, nor ground stomp to stun enemies. This ultimate is great for this build, as we have many different ways to reduce its cooldown. First, Supreme Iron Maelstrom will reduce its cooldown by 1 second each time you deal damage to an enemy after swapping weapons. We swap weapons constantly in this build, so that's easy to do. We'll also take the strategic ground stomp upgrade of ground stomp, reducing its cooldown by 1 second for each enemy damaged by ground stomp, and what makes it even better is that this effect also works with the 100,000 steps passive ability. Then we come to ground stomp. You want to use this at the start of a fight to make sure enemies are stunned. This will both prevent them from attacking you and allow you to set off your combos while taking advantage of all stun related affixes. As previously stated, this will also reduce the cooldown of your ultimate, so try to hit as many enemies as possible while aiming for elites. The idea for this build is to destroy your enemies before they even have a chance to react, but there will be times when things go south and you'll get crowd controlled or your health quickly drops. Iron Skin mitigates all of these scenarios thanks to the aspect of the Iron Warrior, which grants you Unstoppable in addition to its regular effects. Make sure to save it for when you need it most. Enemies deal so much damage that you'll need enough life and damage reduction to be able to withstand their attacks without dying in a single hit, and for this reason you'll want to get and max out Imposing Presence, Martial Vigor, and Pit Fighter passives. As previously stated, Exposed Vulnerability will guarantee that you apply Vulnerable with Hammer of the Ancients after using Death Blow. Each time you assign into this passive, you will provide 1 second of vulnerability, so 2 points should be enough to keep it active during your rotation. The Concussive passive provides a lucky hit chance to stun all enemies hit by your Hammer of the Ancients. This will trigger even more often thanks to the Luckbringer aspect, which increases lucky hit chance when all bonuses of the Walking Arsenal are active. Furious Impulse generates Fury each time you weapon swap, allowing you to maintain max Fury at all times, while Tempered Fury increases your maximum Fury to further boost Hammer of the Ancient damage. To further boost our damage, we'll take Wallop, which increases your Hammer of the Ancient's damage while enemies are stunned or vulnerable, as well as No Mercy, which increases critical strike chance against stunned enemies. One downside of this build is the lack of mobility, so you can compensate for this by getting the Swiftness passive, which increases your movement speed. Finally, we'll take Brute Force, which massively increases the overpower damage when using a two-handed weapon. This works great with the Earth Strikers aspect, which provides us with a guaranteed overpower attack. For your weapon technique, I recommend the two-handed axe expertise, as you'll be able to constantly maintain vulnerable on enemies, greatly increasing your overall damage. Next, we'll take a look at the legendary aspects you can get for this build. First, we'll take a look at ones that you can get from the Codex of Power. The first one is Edgemaster's aspect. This aspect increases the damage of all your skills by 1% based on your available Fury when you cast them. Since we're already going to max Fury, this will massively increase the damage of our skills. The aspect of Retribution proportionally increases your damage against stunned enemies. You should equip it on a two-handed weapon for even more efficiency. Aspect of Ancestral Force. This provides a big AoE to our Hammer of the Ancients, not only dealing damage, but applying all damage effects like the stun as well. It's not necessary to slot it into a two-handed weapon, as you'll be directly hitting elites, and you'll want to finish off the other enemies with Death Blow anyways. Earthstriker's aspect makes it so that you guarantee an overpower attack with increased damage with any of your skills after swapping weapons 10 times. The idea is to use it with Death Blow for single target damage or with Hammer of the Ancients when dealing with groups. Aspect of the Iron Warrior. This will be your unstoppable mechanic, so you make sure to get it as soon as possible. It'll give you increased damage reduction while Iron Skin is active. And lastly, Aspect of Protector, which provides you with a barrier when you damage an elite. Next, moving to the dropped aspects, first is Weapon Master's aspect. This aspect is crucial for this build as it provides an additional charge to Death Blow, providing a ton of options during combat. The Lucky Hit stun effect is also amazing thanks to the Luckbringer aspect. Aspect of Limitless Range. This allows you to capitalize the excess Fury you generate by increasing the damage of Hammer of the Ancients by a percentage, further boosting your damage. Aspect of Encroaching Wrath. As mentioned before, this aspect massively increases the damage of your Death Blow after you spend 100 Fury. You should slot it into a two-handed weapon for double the effect. Luckbringer aspect. This greatly increases the lucky hit chance while all passives of Walking Arsenal are active. This is especially useful in combination with Concussion, which allows you to stun enemies while attacking with Hammer of the Ancients, and with Weapon Master's aspect, which allows you to stun while using Death Blow. In addition to these, there are two uniques you should look out for this build, and the first is 100,000 Steps. These are unique boots. These boots provide everything we need for this build. For starters, it'll give you damage to stunned enemies and damage with skills that change weapons. The added dexterity is nice to have, and the plus rank to Ground Stomp will reduce its cooldown. Its unique effect will trigger when you get a full Walking Arsenal cycle, even if it's still active, generating a ton of Fury and triggering a free Ground Stomp that stuns enemies. The strategic Ground Stomp will also apply, reducing your ultimate cooldown. And the other one is Romulandi's Magnus Opus. This is a unique one-handed sword, and while not mandatory for this build, I personally like this weapon because of the lucky hit effect, which restores a percentage of your Fury, which synergizes greatly with your Luckbringer aspect. Bonuses you want to look for in your gear are Maximum Fury, ranks to Death Blow, Hammer of the Ancients, and passives, damage to skills that swap to new weapons, damage with two-handed slashing weapons, two-handed bludgeoning weapons, damage to stunned enemies, and core skill damage, amongst others. Also, you want damage reduction from close enemies, maximum life, and anything that gives you damage reduction on the defensive side. For gems on your weapon, you want emeralds to increase your vulnerable damage, or to slot diamonds to increase the damage of your ultimate depending on how you like to play. On armor, you want rubies to boost your maximum life, and on jewelry, you should try and compensate for any resistances that you're lacking. When it comes to the Paragon system, you should slot the Mortal Draw glyph into the socket, which increases skill damage when you swap weapons for each point of dexterity within range. Once you allocate at least 25 dexterity around it, you'll get the additional bonus, which increases the critical strike chance when swapping weapons. Try to get as many strength nodes as possible, but also make sure to fill the socketed glyph requirements on its radius in order to acquire additional bonuses and to maximize its effect. Once you reach the top, you'll have to decide what Paragon board to go for, and I recommend the Bonebreaker board. There's a rare node called Bludgeoner, which increases your damage with two-handed bludgeoning weapons as well as your overpower damage, which is perfect for Hammer of the Ancients. Final tips. This build is easy to play but difficult to master. You'll want to learn how many skill activations are required to trigger your weapon mastery combo, as well as your overpower combo to use them in the precise moments and situations as needed. Deathblow has a massive 100% bonus damage against bosses. If you time it right, you can create a combo where you combine both the weapon mastery damage with the overpower damage for a devastating blow. Make sure to use the Hammer of the Ancients first to apply the vulnerable effect. Don't be shy about using Iron Maelstrom, as you'll quickly regain access to it thanks to its cooldown reduction mechanics. And lastly, keep an eye on your buff bar above your skills, as this will let you know when your weapon mastery damage combo and overpower combo are available. So that wraps up our Juggernaut build. I hope you guys are seeing here another powerful Barbarian build that can go toe-to-toe with Whirlwind, and in some cases, even outperform it. Stay tuned for more Diablo 4 content as we go through more builds at 50+, and then move into the Tier 4 of the game.